All right, good evening. Everybody, and just finishing some setup here. Brian, Kyle, Titan. Brian. Let me get this volume turned down. I'll just mute it. I need a few other things besides a haircut too, Brian. We'll get a few more people in here and then we'll get this party started. We got some new topics for tonight. We're gonna talk about convention cars. They came in earlier this week. Then we're gonna talk about loose versus carded. That is the big topic for tonight. And then someone had asked about team transport previews, car culture, and as well. And we're going to talk about the JDM versus gasser craze. And something else that has come up today, or in the last couple of days, scalpers and scammers. And, you know, we'll take everybody's opinion on that and go from there. The big thing is, let's have some fun with this. I think things are turning in the right direction as far as health-wise goes. Nice one, Brian. But I've seen your room, so I know you have some loose stuff. Kyle and Hot Wheels guy, good to see you tonight. I think we can get this party started, and let's start out with talking about the convention cars, because that seems to be the thing of the moment right now. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you some of the goodies that I got this week as part of the convention package that I got. So the first thing is you get this handy dandy folder right here. It's just a folder, and in it has like the schedule for the convention, but they didn't send it this year. There's a Q&A form and a couple other pieces that go with it. It's just really something to be held on to. Then you get your event pass. I'm going to show mine here. And you know, you see your collector number, your newsletter number, and then any extras that you have. I had a pre-order of a shirt, and these were obviously printed before I had a convention, or I had ordered a second finale car. But on the back, what you see is this. And it has a preview of all the cars, minus the RLC car and the finale car. So you get to see what's coming up, and then you have a list of events that go on. Souvenir sales, bingo, coloring contest. I think they did that again. Custom contest. And then there is some downhill racing both, and Sizzlers racing. The other great thing about this is what I use to collect my autographs on for the couple of times I've been through the autograph line. So this makes a great way to collect autographs. Because when you go through the autograph line, you're limited to having 2 things signed. So, you know, if you bring a car to have signed, that's one thing, and then they usually have an e-sheet. That's how most people get. The old school way of identifying where cars are at in certain rooms, and believe it or not, there's quite a few people that still do that. Instead of, some people take pictures of the room number and of certain cars, but there's a lot of people who do it the old school way, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. Any questions, any comments? You get your standard hat. You get a little bag. Get a lanyard. They're dime a dozen. This year, they put in a little do-rag with the logo on it. This is something different. I think in Dallas they gave us protectors. All right, now and now for what everybody really wants to see. Okay, so we'll go with car number 1, or honestly the one that's my favorite, but I know a lot of people don't really care for this car, or don't think it's as great as everything else. Car number 1, the 1970 Dodge Power Wagon in blue. I think that's probably Carolina blue. On Real Riders. You can try to move my fingers out of the way. And in red on the hood. Tampo are on the lights, and then I don't know if I can get a good view of it. Weber on the license plate, and then it gives the dates for nationals on the tailgate. This is number 5447 of 6,000. Carl, welcome. This is my favorite truck, period. I'm a Dodge guy. I own a Dodge. This is my truck. Chuck, welcome. So you just missed the first car that we're previewing tonight. All right, up next, we've got the Gasser. Now, my numbers were pretty good. Mine was this is number 328 of 6,500. Yes, there were different amounts made this year. There were 6,000 of the truck, 6,500 of the Gasser. It comes in white with a black roof, with white lightning delivery, so a reference to the old moonshiner days from down south, with Firestone rear tires and a few other assorted decals. Again, it's just the Nationals. And again, this was number 328 of 6,500. All of my gassers were in the 300s, so pretty stoked about that. All right. And one from here. This is the finale car. You could order two. Oh, Chuck, you're going to have to wait for a different video on that, but it will get ripped open. It's going to get added to the ripping party on the 13th, Saturday night. But it'll get ripped open. Along with one Dodge and probably one of these. Last car that I have anyway is the 510 sedan. The cool thing about this car is that it was painted up very similar to the 510 Wagon from LA a couple of years ago. So this one is number 776 of 5,000. So again, there was less of these made than all of the cars. Fred, Steve, welcome. It is what it is. It's the 71 510. Steve, you might want to turn away here in a couple of weeks, because yeah, we're gonna rip one open. I'll give you the card if you want it, but we're not ripping anything tonight, so everything's safe. Not pictured is the panel, the 64. I wish I could describe that to you. The paint on it is amazing. It has a raised surface similar to what the Novas had from 2018, but that's on the 64. It's on the side. Then the pink car has finally been shown as well, and that's the T1 Rockster. Honestly, I think that car, the paint on it is amazing. It just stands out. I know there are a few people that were kind of, I don't know if bummed was the right word, were kind of surprised, but it looks really nice. If you haven't seen the pictures of it, if you go to Lamley or T-Hunted, I think it's there as well. So that kind of covers all of the cars that we had for tonight. Ken, it's good to see you. How are things out in Maryland? And Mike, how's things up in Sioux City? So any questions about convention cars or how they work or who gets them? Yeah, I think they do too, Brent. They look amazing. Especially, like I said, I think the Rockster looks really, really good. Okay, so that pretty much covered convention cars as far as what I have available and what I had to talk about. So if there's any questions or comments, please let me know. Well, I hope things get better up there in Sioux City. It's been a kind of hectic week with all the new cases popping up. The next thing we can talk about is, it was a comment made by Mr. Dave Baumgartner up in Baltimore, was how do you collect, and specifically loose versus carded? And do we go this way or do we go this way? Which one's right, which one's wrong? Or are they both right, or are they both wrong? So I'm open to comments. Anybody want to chime in? Personally, I think it depends on the car. It really does. This is collector number 271, the funny car. that value is in the card itself. Without the car is worthless. It's about a 50-cent car. So that's one of those cases where the card is more valuable. And so you collect for the card for that one. Hi, Janet. Yeah, Brent, I think you're right too. I think both are right. That's another thing too. You know, a lot of Hot Wheels guys, that's one thing a lot of people do is they buy multiples so that they can have their one loose car to display, because these cars look really great outside of the package, I'm not going to lie. And then you can have one that's still carded for trading or to save for a later date. Looking for a quote from Mike Zarnock that I had seen a long time ago, and I couldn't remember where he had said it at. But basically, what he was getting at is that certain cars, no matter what they are, if they're open or carded, will always have value. If you collect along that lines, collect for value. I think he was actually talking about the 510 BRE from the Vintage Racing. He goes, and he was basically saying, if it's carded, it's still going to command a price. Even if it's not carded, it's still going to command a high price just because of what the car is. So I couldn't find it. I really wanted to have that posted, a link to it so you can see that. Because I feel like there are people who think that the only way to collect value-wise is carded. And I disagree with that, because you look at red lines and most of those are loose. And they still command a value, mostly because there's a finite number of them, but they're still a value anyway. So Chuck says he collects both. And it depends on how many of it is. And he even says a couple of it's been autographed. And that's something too. When you're talking about autographs, there are a few collectors who believe that getting a car itself, or the card signed, actually ruins the value of the car. And that thought process is that when you go to the conventions and some of these other bigger shows out, I think there's a couple on the East Coast, they're readily available. These, getting signatures from the designers are pretty easy. They do go out of their way to try to meet expectations of fans, within reason, of course. So, Larry Wood signing something, his signature's all over the place. I mean, losing, a desirability or a collectability of that, it's a common signature, so to speak. So I think there's that thought process too. Questions on that? I mean, the old adage, collect what you like what you collect, is very true in everything that you do when it comes to diecast. And nobody should be telling you that you've ruined your collection because you do this or do that with it. It's your collection. Choose how you like. And if it makes you happy, then by all means, go for it. People may not understand it, and that's okay, because it only has to make sense to you. Let's see. Any questions or any other thoughts on open and loose, or open and carded? Signed cars, Brent. Is it something that you think adds to or detracts away from the car? I don't think it does, but by the actual designer is pretty cool. I did help Mike with that. You know that he is a big Gasser fan, and he did get the chance to meet Brendan in Chicago last year, and that was a big. You don't think it hurts the value? Thanks for stopping in tonight. Have any thoughts on Carded and Loose? There was a question by one of the folks, Mr. Jeff. Thanks for stopping by tonight. One of our members asked if there could be a preview on team transport or car culture. Well, there is. You can go to the Hot Wheels Wiki, and there they will have a list of cars that are coming out for 2020, and I'm trying to get scrolled down there so we can talk about these a little bit. I'll post that link to the page tonight so that everybody can take a look at that. Look a little bit earlier tonight, and I did see some really interesting cars that are going to be featured, and I am looking forward to them. But we're starting at 2020. The first round, as you know, is the Door Slammers, and that contains a bunch of European cars that were for circuit racing on some of the road courses that are out in Europe. And this is a really good set, I think, in my opinion. It's a nice mix of European and one American, but it's a European version. And, of course, the 510 is in there as well. I like it. The card art is really done well by Mr. Julian. And then the next round is the Japan Historics 3. I think this is the signature line for car culture. And this group has set the standard for all of the car culture series. I do like that they've introduced 3 new models to the set, as well as getting real riders to a couple others that haven't been done before. So a good mix. I think the pickup truck to me is the standout here. Any thoughts on that before we go on? Is the all-terrain set. Now there have been pictures of this that's floated around on the internet. The wiki doesn't have those pictures, but to me, the 85 Bronco in California Highway Patrol decoration is got to be the highlight. They also have the 959 Off-Road, which is probably going to be pretty similar to the Matchbox version. I don't know if it's going to be the same casting as it, but it'll probably be pretty similar to that. And then the 67 Off-Road, that's been done before already. And the Land Rover 110, done in a premium series, but a little bit easier for everybody to get, vice the period correct pieces they're still pretty high right now, but are coming down. Said I think the Bronco is the car out of that set, and anytime you can get something to look like old school police is just awesome. Haven't really seen anything on that, but the thing that's interesting about that is there's 3 new castings in this set, and it looks like 2 retools a little bit. So a Ford RS 200, I have not seen a picture of that. Mr. Dave, how are you? And the Volkswagen ID-R, I honestly don't know what that is. And the Lancia 037, that's going to be pretty cool, I think. Those were used a lot in off-road and rally racing, and that is just going to be a really cool car, I think. The Audi is the Audi. We've already seen that. And the 934.5, we've seen those already as well. We're going to have another round of modern classics. And again, there is a new Mercedes. Yes, Dave, I will check that mailbox for sure. A Mercedes-Benz 280, I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be like. I'm hoping maybe it's similar to the 190E. Brent, you're a Benz guy. Do you happen to know what the 280 is going to look like, or is it going to be like the old school? Well, I wasn't trying to say anything about that, Brent, but yeah, the package arrived nice and safe, and yeah, I'm not disappointed. Modern classics. The Jetta Mark III is the same one from the Fast and Furious, that S14, and another Civic EG is going to come out. So that takes us into the Power Trip, which the cool thing about the Power Trip is we're going to get the Cyclone in Real Riders along with the Chevy Love. So that's going to be pretty awesome if you ask me. These are going to be metal as always. But the Cyclone is the one I look forward to the most. I think that's going to be pretty awesome. Now, if they can just make a Dodge Dakota, life would be good. Questions or comments on the car culture cars that we featured or talked about? Made it in a little late. We already went through the loose and carded discussion, but if you wanted to bring any points up, that would be more than welcome because your opinion is greatly valued. Is Matchbox made a Pontiac Vibe GT with Real Riders? That is a... So I think we've seen most of the team transports already. I just want to talk about Mix 7 that has the Porsche RWB in it. The interesting thing about that Porsche is that 25 card backs were signed by the graphic designer Julian Coyles. He signed 25 of those, and we do have one member that was lucky enough to find one. So if they do start showing up again once all of this is over, pay attention to the back of the back side of the card behind the transporter. There is a spot there for where a signature was placed, so something else to think about. Okay, so Mix 7 also has the Superbird in it and the Mazda 787. Hopefully, this Mazda will not have the same issues that have plagued the 787 in packaging. The 787 has a tendency for that rear wing to get bent. The first time it was used, I mean, that was the biggest complaint about it. The rear wing, it's plastic, so it got bent, and with a little tweaking, it gets straightened out. But hopefully, this one won't have the issues of that one. I think there's 3 really great cars in here. Overall, the set's pretty good. Actually, we've got the 320, the 69 Boss 302 on a retro rig, I believe. Yep. And then the 2016 GT Race, and I think that's in Castrol decoration on the C800. And then the best one, in my opinion, is the 300 SL Mercedes in the black and gray on a Euro hauler. So too, on the Mazda brand, I think that's gonna fix a lot of those wing issues that car had in the Circuit Legends set. That's the set that it came out of. Just for whatever reason, that car, when you put the blister on it, just those wings did not survive well. Car in that set is the VW Classic Bug on a T1 car, on a T1 transporter. And last and definitely not least, we've got the Supreme Fleet Flyer on the 92 BMW M3. That car could only be ordered through Supreme's website, and I think it sold out in like 6 minutes or less. It's value, and although it's starting to go down now, and I think you can, if you're lucky, you can pay about $100 for one. If you're a BMW fan, or if you're a completist, this is definitely worth grabbing. I think the car is just unbelievably beautiful, but I'm a BMW fan, so I might be slightly opinion. So is there any questions on any of these new Team Transport cars that we've talked about? Move on to another subject here. Or if Dave, if you want to speak up about your thoughts on carded versus loose, because I know that was a question that you had brought up during last week's episode. So anytime you want to, if you feel like you want to pop in on that, that'd be awesome. If you're still here. Into the Cheetos tonight. I should, but I won't. Mr. Brian Hetrick brought up a question about what's your thoughts on the whole carded versus loose? other people that have opinion on it, and they've all brought some good feedback on that. So I was just curious as to what your thoughts were. Liking the video, and I'm glad you're here. And you see what Dave typed up there. He likes to keep his carded as well, at least his supers. And that's understandable. I mean, they are a little bit harder to find. And and I gotta give him a like on that one. I mean, that's the other thing too. I think so much of the new stuff, oh, this is hard to find, it's hard to find. It's just really a matter of time and patience before you find it. Rewarded. Rolls us into the next thing I want to talk about, which is scalpers and scammers. Really touchy subject. What is a scalper? What is a scammer? Clear definition of what a scammer is than there is a scalper. I think that scalping area can be sometimes, and I think that goes more towards the definition of scalping is. Let's talk about scammers first, because like I said, I think that's a little bit more easy to define. Deceiving people and representing, saying you have car X, and then don't ship car X and take somebody's money. There's no place for that. There's no place for that in the hobby. There's definitely no place for that here. And evaluate what your priorities are. I'll admit it. There was a gentleman by the name of Joe Klassen that got me for about $300 and only sent me about $150 of it to some of the kind of report and keep track on some of the scammers. Now, I could have filed a police report. I could have cried and said so-and-so did something to me. But I chose to do neither. I chose to use it as a learning tool and as a lesson. So anytime I get into a new group, I check out the members, I check out the leadership of that group, and I reference the reference check page to see what's on there. And you can tell within probably 10 minutes of doing a little bit of research whether or not this group is reputable or not, because most of the groups now, you are referenced in the reference check group, which is on our page, or I just need to talk to a couple people and they'll say, oh, this guy's okay, this guy, yeah, you might want to stay away from. Anybody's thoughts on scammers? Thanks for popping in tonight. opinion on scammers. Doesn't mean that my opinion is correct. Doesn't mean my opinion is the only opinion. It's just my opinion. For stopping in tonight. How you treat people and how you communicate with them into how you are received and how you will be treated, if that makes sense. I think that usually gets returned back to you. Dave makes a great point. You know, had I done that when I was dealing with the person that I had previously mentioned, I don't think I would have been scammed. Hence, what I learned out of that was I found the reference check page and to kind of as a tool to kind of judge where a group or a person sits at. Kenny, thanks for coming in tonight. We're just talking about scammers versus scalpers. That's a whole different subject. Somewhat related, but not totally related. There are people who do this for a living. I don't know how else to say that. There are folks that to do it as a not as a hobby, but as a living. And then you have your hobby dealers, and that's a whole totally different group. But we all know that collector or collector is the right word I want to use. But the person that comes in and buys 6 of something, and then they turn around and charge $2 to $3 for a brand new basic car. Price gouging, are they being a scalper, or are they someone that is driving around buying up everything and then, trying to make a living? A lot of these cars around, I think, for a brand new first edition of, say, the Honda Prelude, for example. I think that's kind of doesn't really make sense to me. They issue another color of it, or when more cases of it show up, it's just a dollar car. Now, I guess that's just my 2 cents on it. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Thanks for coming tonight. I really enjoyed your trade day that you did over Facebook Messenger. I think that was a great idea. About scalpers at the moment, because that was a topic that came up for discussion. Making a little bit of extra money, there is time involved, there is gas involved, table fees, all of that plays into it too. So I can't begrudge somebody for marking up a little bit, but at what point does marking up and overcharging become seen together as one? Dave posted here. That's really great advice, Dave. You know, we've seen quite a few things. We have resources that we can reach out to and say, hey, is this good or bad? You know, and we will do that for you. But just make sure you provide some sort of feedback on that. You know, that way we have the ammunition to talk to the other party and get their side of the story. You know, we don't want any name calling or name pointing done out in public. I mean, if we can solve that amongst ourselves and not on the page, you know, just let us know. You know, we need, I use that term loosely, drama, to be creepy. I think we have a great group of people that talk well amongst each other and really generally want to help each other. So I don't see that happening a lot, but if it does happen, let us know right away so that we can find out what's going on. Action we will, but we want to make sure we have all the proof. We have had one person, they are welcome to come to our meetings and our shows, but they aren't allowed to post or do anything on the page. And that person knows that. They were told that from the beginning. And that's kind of how we'll do things. Now, if you get at a show, well, then we'll go down that road when we need to. But I don't see that happening here, honestly. I think y'all are a great group of people to be around. And, you know, again, thanks for that input, Dave. I think that was really, I think that kind of cleared up a lot of things. On scalpers versus scammers. 10 minutes left, roughly, unless we want to keep going. And the last thing on my list is the JDM gasser craze versus older castings or newer castings. You know, why are we seeing such a craze for the gasser and the JDM cars right now? So anybody want to hop in on that one? We really do. Here's my thing. I think the JDM craze started really with the Fast and Furious movies. That's where it comes from. That's where it's pushed from. I kind of got turned on to the JDM thing, not because it was because of the movies, but because they were different. And I liked it different. I still do. At the time when they were starting to come out, about 2012, 2013 is when I really got into it. You know, it was 67 Camaro, 69 Charger, 65 Mustang, 67 Mustang, Fox Body Mustang, 85 IROC, same grouping of cars, that classic muscle car. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of what Mattel and Hot Wheels kind of pushed in the early Redlines days. You know, they wanted to have those cars that you would see on the street. You want to put them into kids' hands, and that's one of the things that Elliott Handler had said, and he's the guy that was running Mattel at the time in the mid to late 60s. In fact, one of the first cars that's built, it's a modified 65 El Camino, that was one of the designer's actual cars. And we all know that that's been a practice that's gone on throughout the years of, designers building their own cars into Hot Wheels. Gassers, I think that's just something that when it came out everybody liked and has gravitated, and it's really just taken off since then. That's just my opinion on that. And Brent's a huge Nova fan and a Malibu guy, and he even has some JDM cars. I'm thinking the JDM thing is getting to be a little bit overplayed too much, and it's starting to lose kind of its luster for me. So I'm hoping maybe they'll go more of a European route, or maybe some newer trucks would be nice to see. What else is everybody else's thoughts on the JDM versus Gasser debate? Them Benz, Mr. 380, huge 380 SEL Mercedes-Benz fan, and if you don't know which that one is, that's the one that has the dog sticking out one of the rear doors. I can't remember, is it the left or the right door? Is a classic casting to me, even so much so that he's kind of got me starting to collect them now too. So I always thought them as limos without being limos. On the JDM versus JDM gasser craze that's kind of going on right now versus some of the older castings, or okay, so that answered that question. Fans in here? Do we have a bunch of Mustang guys? Do we have some Charger folks? I know, Dave, you're a Charger guy. I think you're right there. I kind of agree with you. It was different at the time, and Mr. Roy Lee Friend has said this before and many other times, that if Mattel finds something that works, they're gonna go with it, and they're gonna push it and push it and push it until it doesn't work anymore. That's why do you see so many gassers, so many 510s, whether it's the wagon or the sedan, and so many 55 gassers, and even branching out to the Nova and the Cruise, or not the Cruise Bruiser, but the 60 gasser. So, if they see something that works and it sells and it moves, well, they're going to keep doing it. See more European, like I said, I'd like to see some more European cars come back, or some pickups, but I think something different. Yeah, and exactly, if the demand is there, and I think the demand is there because if you look at where the convention cars have been at for 18, both finales being 55 gassers, this year 20 One of the convention cars was a gasser. Pittsburgh was a gasser. So it's a really popular casting. The 510 as well has been done many times, I think, as a convention car. So, right now. They're all great castings too, and for a while, the dairy delivery was like that's the end all be all of castings, along with the VW drag bus, and that was another really big popular casting when it came out in '96. It's cooled off a little bit, but it's still really popular. So I think the key here is to be different and not pumping out. Not been a super yet. The Wagon has, but not the sedan. Been a super once, I think. So that's interesting in and of itself too. So that's a whole nother things that we'd probably like to see come back or like to see more of. As far as an El Camino goes, I mean, if they can do a 72 Ranchero, let's do a mid-70s Elco. I think that would be kind of cool. Every body style out there, I think. I think they've got just about all the G bodies too. I think they've done the Olds, the Monties, the Buicks, Pontiacs. I'd like to see some you've got a one of one sitting in your garage. That's gonna, well, they kind of do. I mean, Johnny has it, but all right. To wrap it up for this week's show, like I said, we covered loose versus carded, convention cars, team transport car culture, JDM versus and gasser craze, and we talked about scalpers and scammers. One other thing that I kind of missed that we can talk about for a second, we'll just go over for a little bit, is where do you find your holy grail cars? I think that's the best way to describe it. Adam Grapes, who's down in Oklahoma, yeah, we'll talk about that too. He had a question, is where do you find those last few cars that you need to complete a collection? And Adam kind of joked a little bit, and they talked about, was there a certain place, a certain individual that has some of these. His name is Mike. Well, when you start getting into those rare prototypes or FEPs, or for those who don't know what FEP is, it's when they do test shots of paint and stuff to see kind of how the car looks, test the tampos and see how they look on the car and everything. Some of those make it into the personal collections of some of the designers, and employees, and then they going out on the public market once certain folks sell off their collections. I think that's how Brent came across a couple of his Mercedes that he has. You know, where do you find those? Well, that's where research comes into play. You know, most of the designers are pretty open to talking to them about those sort of things, like, you know, well, how many prototypes were made, or how was this or that? You know, how do you develop a relationship with those folks? Listening to other collectors, especially guys that have been around for a long time. Just by doing some research on the internet, looking at the wikis, T-Hunted, the Brazilian Hot Wheels website, you know, it just takes a little bit of research, and eventually pictures start showing up. You know, that would be how I would suggest looking for those rare cars, and, you know, ask questions. Brent has really good about, he likes collecting books. And some of these books have in them pictures of new models from, say, 2002 or 3, 4, whatever. But anyway, sometimes in those pictures, they'll actually have the prototype, a picture of the prototype, and not the production car. So that's another way to look at that. Dustin, thanks for coming in tonight. And the last thing we'll talk about is week 2 voting for RLC. I surprises last week, so you still have a few days yet to vote. I need to get that done myself. Again, like we stated last week, this is your opportunity as an RLC member to pick the car you want to be your selections car, and ultimately design, color, wheels, and everything about the car, provided that the choices that Mattel gives you. All right, any questions for myself or for the group? Thanks for stopping in again, and hopefully things keep getting better. Out here in Nebraska, they are starting to talk about limited opening of elective surgeries. I think they talked about places to get haircuts, because as that was pointed out to me. But to, you know, but continue to be safe, look after each other, and continue to communicate with each other. I see lots of good feedback, lots of good comments. You know, there's guys showing off their photography skills. We will keep you all safe. Nothing but peace and love out there, to quote the great Greg Sully. And we will see you next week. All right. Good night, everyone.